Kirby Smart basically called out the Sanford Stadium crowd, the Georgia Bulldog crowd on Saturday after the Dogs beat Auburn 31-13. I was, out and about. I was at the game. I was, at moments I was in the crowd, at moments I was in the press box. I usually get around at these things, and I do think that the crowd was a little bit quieter, right? I go to a lot of these, or pretty much every Georgia football game at this point. I see what it's like at Alabama. I see what it's like at other places. So let's dive into the nitty gritty of what Kirby Smart was saying, because he said it. He brought it up. He wasn't asked about this directly, but he did bring it up in the post game press conference after the game, and then he brought it up again when he had an exclusive interview with Fox. He doubled down on it and talked about how he was disappointed and in the Georgia faithful, basically, and how it's going to matter. And you see it across college football, right? It's chaos right now. It's at least these teams at the top, at the very minimum, just seem to be a little bit more vulnerable. I think that saying that the playing field has completely leveled out, or leveled out in general, is not quite fair yet. But yeah, look, Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt. Georgia almost lost to Kentucky. And these games happen, right? Clemson has won the national championship by losing a game. Georgia's won the national championship and they've lost a game. Whether it's to a really good team or not to a really good team, championship quality teams still lose football games, but it just kind of feels like a lot is happening at once, right? A lot of teams got upset at once across the country to make you think, okay, well, teams are vulnerable and it's going to be gritty week in, week out. Georgia's offense, I think, is part of why the crowd has quieted down. It's boring, right? It's boring. I want to talk about that aspect of it. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. Link is down below for the newsletter. We're pushing out content. You want to be first to hear. You want to be the one that tells your buddies about Carson Beck getting named the starter. I'm trying to think of breaking news over the last couple of years. A player getting arrested. You want to hear about all sorts of stuff. Right? The newsletter is a great way to be up to date. So make sure you're checking that out. I won't bore you too much. It's free. At least look at the link down below and tell me what you think. Don't just ignore the newsletter. It's down below. Georgia's offense was boring against Kentucky. It was kind of boring against Tennessee Tech. It was flat for a half, and I think it had plenty of exciting moments in the second half against Kentucky. And then, of course, in the Auburn game, it was boring, right? I didn't think it was a football game where I would have turned it off necessarily, but it wasn't exciting. There is a lack of explosive plays. When you look at Auburn in this Georgia game, Auburn had a couple explosive. Obviously, they scored on it. If you're a Georgia defense, you don't want that to happen. But especially running the football, Georgia's just had a hard time getting big runs. Obviously, that end around to Dylan Bell. Nate Frazier had a solid run, and Trevor Etienne had that 23-yard run, but it's not like Trevor Etienne's dominating. 16 for 88 carries and 2 touchdowns is pretty good. In the passing game, you get the Lawson Lucky pass. That's the only pass that was for 30 yards or more. Colby Young gets that 127-yard pass. Lon Humphreys gets a 25-yard pass. But for the most part, what Georgia did on Saturday was play to Carson Beck's strengths and play to their offensive strengths. And it's just not super exciting football. Carson Beck at his best is really good in the short and intermediate passing game, and Georgia wants to run the ball combined with that. That's what Georgia wants to do on offense. They did a really good job of that look, that's not the only thing Georgia wants to do on offense. What I'm saying is that is where they don't struggle as much when you combine the run game with the short passing game. It's what Carson Beck is good at. Carson Beck has never been a quarterback for Georgia that's just going to drop back and light it up and make all these plays outside the pocket. There's a lot of that in college football right now, and we've seen glimpses of it, right? In desperation when Georgia's trying to claw its way back from a big deficit against Alabama, and you see Carson connect with Aaron Smith deep. You see Carson connect with Dylan Bell deep. You see him going after Colby Young deep. That's fun. And explosive plays are fun, and they don't have to be deep passes to be explosive plays. But so far, Georgia's offense hasn't been super exciting. It was more exciting to watch when Stetson Bennett, and this is not comparing. I mean, yeah, we are comparing. It was more it was more exciting to watch when Stetson Bennett was out there. And you had a Brock Bowers, and you had just more high-level playmakers. So I think there's a few things that goes into all of this. The crowd is not as elite. It's not an elite crowd. And then some people are going to watch this and they're going to hate this coming from me. And they're going to be like, man, Ryan, really? Like, you're going to dog on us? It's not really criticism's kind of stretched. It's more so just me stating a fact off of personal experience. I've heard it get louder at Neyland Stadium. I've heard it get louder at Jordan-Hare Stadium for Auburn. I've heard it get louder at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Dean and Matt, and I think I tried to say something on riding home the other day. Or more specifically, Dean, not impressed with the Alabama crowd. It was loud. All right, it was a really loud crowd and had a lot of big moments. And it's kind of hard to be excited when you're up by a big margin and the other team is starting to come back. Yeah, then Alabama's crowd is going to quiet down a little bit. But it had elite moments, right? You didn't get in a single elite moment against Auburn or the Georgia crowd, right? I don't understand why a game that is 14-3, I get it, 14-3, but it's not over. People are leaving at halftime. People are leaving in the third quarter. This was not a game that was over until the fourth quarter, right? This is a game that Georgia had control of, but not complete control of, not complete grasp of. So why is it not as loud? Well, I have a few different theories and love them or hate them. One, like I've already discussed to an extent, Georgia's offense hasn't been super exciting because they haven't been running the ball super effectively, and the passing game has been up and down. And, of course, at home, what have we had? Tennessee Tech and Auburn. It's not going to get super, super loud against Tennessee Tech. It was the Auburn game that was a little bit surprising because I tell you what, the Auburn game is a huge weekend. You go and you look at the bars downtown. You go and look at the traffic in Athens on Friday and Sunday leaving the game. And just even after the game, it's a heavy traffic game. It gets packed. People show out for this Auburn game. It's a rivalry that people have really cared about for a long time, and it's a rivalry where Georgia shows up at Auburn and Auburn shows up at Georgia. At least the fans do. Yet it was still a little bit quiet. The excitement wasn't there, and the crowd didn't pack the punch. Part of that is because there aren't as exciting moments. Part of it is because they've seen better the last couple of years. That's the other side of this coin is it was exciting a couple years ago when you had Stetson and Bowers and all those guys. It was exciting before that when you had a lot of superstar level talent. This Georgia team is just not as filled with superstars. Really, really, really good. I still think it's a team that can win the national championship. Losing to Alabama, who lost to Vanderbilt, that's not the end-all, be-all. And Georgia could probably still lose one more game and go on to win the national championship. I think that Texas isn't a must-win. Alabama wasn't a must-win. But this Texas game is getting closer to a must-win. That's going to be on the road. All of Georgia's big games this year outside of Tennessee and Georgia Tech and Auburn are on the road. So the home schedule for Georgia is not as exciting. But Kirby, look, here, let me just pull up what Kirby said just so I don't misquote him. We're not going to win all of our games all the time. He was talking about, this is after the Auburn game, he's talking about how the entire conversation was about Alabama the week leading up to the Auburn game. This is what he had to say. Humility is a week away in our league at all times, and that's the consistency I want to have. We're not going to win all of our games all the time. That's not going to happen. I want our fan base to appreciate what we have and give their all and be unbelievable with crowd noise and make energy at home games. We need it to be tough on the other teams to play here, but it's not. It's not the same as it's been in the past. It's got to be energetic. It's got to be. It was hot today. It was hot, but it's been hot on all our players. They pushed through. It was a tough week, and we answered the bell. It hasn't been elite. It has elite moments. In big games, when College Game Day shows up, it got loud when Georgia played Ole Miss at night last year. It got really loud when Georgia played Tennessee in 2022. It got really loud when College Game Day showed up and you had a top 10 matchup against Arkansas at noon. That was arguably the loudest I heard it. It was extremely loud when they played Notre Dame. It gets loud for some of these other games. It got loud against South Carolina in 2023 when Georgia's needing to make a little bit of a comeback in the second half. But it's not as consistent. And I can't speak on the general consistency of other stadiums. The truth is I don't go see Auburn play Vanderbilt. I don't see Alabama play Missouri. Whatever, right? Whatever combination you want to talk about. For the most part, I'm seeing Georgia go to these places, and obviously they're putting on for an elite crowd. But yes, other places do get louder than Georgia, and I do think that the crowd It's just not that, and it's not me saying it's a super negative thing. It's just not as consistently as elite, I think, as other places. But with a team that is not as good as the championship teams to this point, the crowd helps, and it's going to help in these rivalry games, and it's going to be needed against Tennessee, just like it was. That's kind of my take, is that Kirby is right, but it never really has been super elite. It just has elite moments. Kind of my take. Take what you will. You can be a part of the change if you want. Thanks for watching.